Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. It is that time of month again where we are revisiting all the books we read in June. So welcome to my June reading wrap up. June was a pretty good reading month for me. I ended up reading 10 books, which is kind of like the top of my range of what I normally read. Normally I read about 7 to 10 books per month. So this was really good. I'm really happy with all the books I read. The ratings are pretty good. We'll obviously go over all of that as I go through each book. I also had a pretty good mix of romance and fantasy this month. Usually in the summertime I read a lot more romance, but I did sneak in a couple of fantasies, so we'll go over those as well. But the mix was pretty good. I had 6 romances. One of them may be considered just like a fiction or like a literary fiction or something, but I think it is categorized as a romance. I've had 1 dark romance, I've had 2 fantasies, and 1 paranormal fantasy. So I think it's a pretty good mix. The ratings were pretty good across the board for a lot of these. I don't think I had any misses, but yeah, I'm really happy with all the books I read. So that's always good. And let's go ahead and get started because we have 10 books to go through. The first book I read is Bespelled by Laura Thalassa, and this is the second book in the Bewitched series. And this continues to follow Celine, who is a witch, and Memnon, who is a sorcerer who was cursed. And he believes that Celine is the one who cursed him and that she's also his long lost wife. So that's their story that was introduced in the first book, but obviously I'm not going to go into the plot of this one too much because this is the second book, but I will say this still has very similar vibes to the first book and I loved it just as much. There's still so much like mystery and action and romance in this book, so it is giving a little bit of like mystery thriller, but it is still a paranormal fantasy. I really loved it. I really love these characters. I had a great time reading this and it was a 5-star for me. So that was the first book I read in June. Okay, the next book I read was Leather and Lark by Brynne Weaver, and this is the second book in the Ruinous Love trilogy. The first book is Butcher and Blackbird, which I really loved. This one follows Lachlan, who is Rowan's brother from the first book, and Lark, who is Sloane's best friend also from the first book. So they do make an appearance, but they're like interconnected series. So this one is Lark and Lachlan's story. I did do a more in-depth synopsis of this book in my new releases reading vlog last month. So if you're interested in seeing that, go ahead and check out that video. And I also included the book signing of getting this book signed by the author. So now I have both of these books in the series signed by Brynne Weaver. I'm really happy about that. I love this book. It was also a 5 stars. So obviously this one follows Lachlan and Lark. Lachlan is a contract killer. Lark is also kind of a serial killer, but she doesn't call herself a serial killer. She calls herself a multiple deleter because she likes to delete people off of the planet. So that's like her little thing. So this first starts off with them being enemies because of the way that they meet. But then later on, as the story progresses, they decide that the best thing in order for them to save their friends and family is to do like a fake marriage. So this is a fake marriage, enemies to lovers. I didn't find this one to be quite as funny as Butcher and Blackbird, but it's still just as good. I still loved it. I really had fun reading this. Brynne Weaver has like a knack for writing like really interesting characters and they're just so fun. I had a great time reading this and I rated this one 5 stars as well. So that's book number 2, Leather and Lark by Brynne Weaver. The next book I read is The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren, and this is also one that I read in my Reading New Releases reading vlog. This one follows Anna and Liam. It starts off with them being in college and Anna is a pre-med major and she's also kind of like struggling financially, whereas Liam is like from a very rich family, but he gets cut off by his family because he doesn't want to like take over the family business. So in order to like help each other, they decide to go into a marriage of convenience so that they could apply for family housing and live on campus. Okay, so it's basically a marriage of convenience. And then they get divorced after they graduate. So then we move on 3 years in the future and Liam hasn't told his family that he's no longer with Anna and his younger sister is actually getting married. So his family obviously expect him to be there and they expect him to bring his wife. So he goes back to find Anna, asks her to come with him and pretend that she's still his wife. Obviously he pays her to do it and you know, that kind of like escalates from there. It starts off as like a marriage of convenience and then kind of turns into a forced proximity situation where they go to this private island for his younger sister's wedding, and it's very like tropical, very summery, very romantic, all these things, and obviously their relationship escalates from there. I found this book to be really, really funny. Like, this book will make you laugh out loud. There is so much family drama. I love the family drama. I love their relationship. Anna's internal monologue was absolutely hilarious. I laughed out loud so many times during this book, and I just loved the summer vibes. I loved the island vibes. It was just really, really fun to read. Originally in my vlog, I rated it a 4.25, but I have since changed that to 5 stars because I just remembered like how much fun I had reading this and how much I laughed. In the moment, I was thinking that like Anna wasn't my favorite character, but then she became like one of my favorite characters, like now that I think about it and now that I've had like a little bit more time to like ruminate on this book. And I just keep thinking about it and going back to it and just remembering how much fun I had reading this. And so that's why I changed my rating. I highly recommend you give this book a chance if you haven't read this. Christina Lauren writing is really, really good. Christina Lauren is actually 2 people. I didn't know this before I picked up this book, but I saw in the back cover here that it's Christina Hobbs and Lauren Billings, and they're like 2 friends and they write together. So definitely want to read more books by them because I just had such a great time reading this book. Like, I don't know how else to say it. I just had such a great time reading this book. So 5 stars. Okay, the next one is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood, and this one is also included in my Reading New Releases reading vlog in my previous video, so go check that out for a more in-depth review. But yes, so I read this one next. This is Ali Hazelwood's new release, and I absolutely loved this book. This is probably one of my favorite books of the year. It's definitely different tonally from any of her other books. It's different from like The Paradise Problem. It's not a summer read. This is like a more emotional, deeper, more serious kind of love story. And this will take you on an emotional journey. Okay, this will take you on a journey. Like, this is deep, it's emotional, like you get very attached to these characters. While I was reading this, I had to know more about them because they're just so incredibly well developed. The story is so well developed. So this essentially follows Rue and Eli. Rue is a woman in STEM. She's a food engineer, and Eli works for the company that actually ends up buying out the company that Rue works for. They start off by meeting on an app for a one-night stand. It doesn't end up working out. And then the next time they see each other is when they realize the situation that they are with their work, and suddenly they're rivals. But they have like this innate attraction to each other. So they like have a very hard time staying away from each other. This book is very spicy, so if you don't like to read that kind of thing, this is probably not for you. But I absolutely loved it. It was so emotional, so deep. I literally couldn't put it down, and I rated it 5 stars. So that's the next one, Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood, and this is one of my top reads of the year. So highly recommend. Okay, the next book I read was House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas, and this is the 3rd book in the Crescent City series, and this has been on my TBR for about 2 months now, and I'm just really happy that I finally read this. There is a lot happening in this book. There are a lot of characters, there are a lot of different points of view, and a lot of different stories happening throughout the story. Personally, I found myself really only being interested in Bryson Hunt's story. I don't know why, but I just kind of wasn't into the side characters as much in this book as I was in the first 2 books. But that's not to say that this was bad in any way. This was still really, really good. I just, for some reason, was not feeling like that interested in all the side characters. I did actually listen to most of this on audio, and I would actually recommend that because I've heard from some people that they had a hard time with like keeping track of whose point of view the story was taking place because there were so many characters. So I thought that listening along to the audio while you're reading, or just listening to the audio, actually helped to like eliminate that problem with like keeping track of like whose POV you're in. So obviously I'm not going to go into the plot of this because this is the 3rd book in a very popular series, so I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say that I did rate it 4 stars only because I wasn't interested in all the storylines of the side characters as much as Bryson Hunt's. So that's the next one, House of Flame and Shadow, and that one was 4 stars. The next book I read was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, and this is the 2nd book in the Part of Your World series. They're technically interconnected standalones because the characters from the 1st book do show up in this book, and it was good to know like what they're all about, so I would actually recommend reading them in order. This one follows Brianna, who is the best friend of Alexis from Part of Your World, and Jacob, who is a new doctor at her hospital. They start off as rivals because they are the only two candidates who are being considered for promotion, so there's like some tension there. And Jacob is not getting a very warm welcome from the rest of the staff because he's new. So Brianna ends up feeling bad for him, decides to be nice, give him a little bit of advice to win them over with food, and that works. And that's kind of like how their relationship develops. And there is also a subplot of Brianna's younger brother who needs a kidney donor. I absolutely loved this book. I loved the characters in this book. Abby Jimenez just does a really great job writing characters that you truly care about, especially Jacob. Like, he is like the quintessential, like, kind-hearted, giving, heroic, like, just like such a good, kind person. And I just really, really loved him. I loved Brianna as well, and I loved their relationship, and I loved her brother. So like Abby did such a good job writing the characters and like really like made you care about them. This was sweet, this was romantic, it pulled on your heartstrings. It was just overall like a really good book, and I highly recommend it. I rated this one 4.5 stars. I don't think it was quite as good as Part of Your World, the first one, although some people will disagree because I believe that a lot of people have this one as their top favorite in this series. So either way, it's still amazing. I love this book, highly recommend, and I rated it 4.5 stars. The next book I read was Hopeless by Elsie Silver, and this is the last book in the Chestnut Springs series. This one follows Bo Eaton and Bailey Jensen. Bo is the military hero brother who comes back from the war. He's injured, but he's like mostly recovered from his injuries, but he's kind of like not participating in life right now. He's like not really engaging very much, and his family is worried about him. Whereas Bailey is the youngest sister of the Jensen family. She's got older brothers who are like rebels, not very liked in town because they commit crimes and they get abusive when they get drunk. They also steal from their neighbors. So in general, the town doesn't really like their family very much. They kind of associate her with them. She works at the local bar, but she needs more money to leave town. So she's looking for new jobs, but she's not getting hired by other people because they're kind of like discriminating against her because of her family. So she's having a hard time with that. So in order to help each other, they decide to go into a marriage of convenience because Bo thinks that her being engaged to him, who is an Eaton, it will help her like kind of like restore her reputation so she could get a job, so she can earn more money and leave town. Whereas him being engaged to her will kind of like help get his family off his back, that like, you know, he's busy with a girl, he's busy with his fiance, he's building his life, he's not just kind of like moping around and, you know, being depressed and things like that. At first, they're just kind of like friends, but then the relationship develops. I actually did really enjoy this book. I had a great time reading it, and I noticed that it's a little bit different from like how Elsie Silver wrote the other books in this series. Whereas in the other books, you just kind of like get to know the characters at the beginning for like the first half of the book, and then immediately at the halfway point, the romance begins, and it's like kind of like spice all the way to the end. This one was a little different in the sense that it was kind of like scattered a little bit more, and I did really enjoy that. I really liked both of these characters. Bo was really sweet, and Bailey was sweet as well, and she was actually really funny, so I enjoyed reading this book. I had a really great time reading it. I love the Chestnut Springs setting and the family vibes because, you know, even though Bailey is kind of an outcast, they just accept her with open arms into the family, and it was just really sweet. So I really enjoyed all the characters in this book. I loved the found family in it, and the romance was also really good. It had really good tension and really good build-up. There was a slight miscommunication towards the end, but it wasn't too bad. I still really enjoyed it. It didn't take away from the book or from the story very much. So I rated this one 4 stars because I really enjoyed it, and I'm just really happy to have completed a series. Moving on, the next book I read was Throne of Glass, the first book of the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas, and that is why I'm wearing this sweatshirt. Just FYI, I did order some bookish merch that has arrived, and I will be showing that in a future video, so stay tuned for that. This will be included in that. And obviously I will link whatever I can. But back to the wrap up. I read the first book of Throne of Glass. I really enjoyed this one. This book starts off following Selena Sardothian. She is a very highly skilled assassin, and she gets caught, so she gets sent to this like prison. So then she is picked up by the king's guard, summoned by the king himself, because he's hosting like this competition where thieves and assassins and like other badass people are competing against each other, and whoever wins will be the king's assassin. And that person can then win their freedom after a few years of serving the king. They can win their freedom and become free. But if they don't win the competition, obviously they get sent back to the prison where they're probably going to die very, very soon. So the main premise of this book is basically following this competition, and it takes place in a castle made of glass. I really loved reading this. It was really fun. It was very interesting. This one is written a little bit more simply than Crescent City. Like Crescent City is super complicated. This one's a lot more straightforward. The writing is easier to digest. It's written a lot more like ACOTAR, and I just really, really enjoyed that. And I'm definitely going to be continuing with the series. The first book I rated 4.5 stars. So that's Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. We're getting near the end. All right. The next one I read was Happy Place by Emily Henry. And I was really happy to read this because obviously I'm getting through Emily Henry's backlist. So I want to read at least one Emily Henry every single month. And June was Happy Place. This book follows a close-knit group of 6 friends, and the main characters are Harriet and Wynne. Harriet is working on her residency in San Francisco, and Wynne is a furniture repairman who is living in Montana taking care of his sick mother. This story takes place in 2 timelines. The first is where the entire group of friends is going to this lake house that they've been visiting year after year. It's a lake house that the father of one of the girls in the group owns, and they've been like summering there a lot, and unfortunately he's now selling the lake house, so this is like their last hurrah together at that lake house. Harriet and Wynne are actually broken up from an engagement, but the friend group doesn't know it yet. They're just kind of like keeping it a secret. And the second timeline is actually the past, where Harriet is having like flashbacks to the past, which is her happy place, and her and Wynne are not broken up. It's before everything happened, and they're still together, they're still engaged. This isn't my favorite Emily Henry book. I rated this one 4.25 stars. I still really, really enjoyed it, but it's not like my favorite one because I think I connected with Funny Story a little bit more than this one. So my current tier ranking of Emily Henry books is Funny Story, then Happy Place, then Beach Read. So Emily Henry's writing is incredible. Like, I just love the descriptions that she writes. Like, you can feel the summer breeze while you're reading this book. I just love the setting in this book. It's very summery. It's so good. Her writing is so good. The characters are also very realistic. Harriet's like internal monologue is very relatable, and they all just seem very realistic. And the friend group is also very likable, I thought. I liked that they didn't get like too much screen time, too much page time. It was like a very good balance between like side characters and the main couples. I don't necessarily love it when books focus too much on the side characters who will like take the story in a different direction. I thought this was very well balanced. They got just enough screen time, and they were also very likable. The romance is full of tension and spice, and it's essentially like a second chance romance. So there's already like deep, deep feelings there that Emily Henry did such a good job writing, that she makes like the reader kind of like feel all those deep feelings, all of like that past history between them. She did such a good job writing that. And it's another emotional journey kind of book. I did, however, feel like some of the parts of this book were a little bit dragged out, so the pacing wasn't quite right for me. But overall, I loved it. I love the characters, I love the story, and I love the ending. So this was a 4.25. Okay, and the last book I read in June was The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry by Gabrielle Zevin. This is technically a fiction, or like a literary fiction, but there is romance in this book as well, but I don't think it's technically considered a romance. But there is a subplot of romance in this, and I did really, really enjoy it still. This focuses on a grumpy bookseller. His name's A.J. Fikry, and he lives on Alice Island. He's introduced to his new publishing rep, Amelia, who recommends a book to him. He's not really interested in it at first. It's called The Late Bloomer, but he's not really interested in it at first. He kind of leaves it in his bookshop, but then eventually he gets around to reading it, and then, you know, connects with her that way because now he's kind of like trusting her recommendations. There are a lot more events in his life that happen throughout this book, and this does follow a couple additional side characters like his sister and her husband and the police chief who's his friend, so it's very interesting and fun to read. It's also very thought-provoking in the sense that it makes you think about the sequence of events in your life. How sometimes if you miss out on something that you really thought you wanted, but then something unexpected and better happens to you because that first thing didn't happen, and it wouldn't have happened otherwise. So I really enjoyed this book. It was very interesting. It was very well written. It's also a quick, short read. It just gives you that feeling of security that everything will be okay in the end, even if bad things happen. I loved the bookstore and the small town on an island setting. It was so cozy. I didn't really follow a lot of the book references in this book because they're just like literary fiction books that I'm not familiar with, but that's okay. It still had like the good bookstore vibes that I love. And I also loved the romance in this. The romance was the main part of the story, but it wasn't like at the forefront of the story, and I still really loved it. I loved the writing. I loved the short sentences. It's written in third person, which is different than what I normally read, so that was like a nice change of pace, and it was very emotional. It really tugs on your heartstrings, so I really enjoyed this book, and I rated it 4 stars. So that's A Storied Life of A.J. Fikry by Gabrielle Zevin, and that was the final book of June that I read. Some of these books are the ones I chose for my June TBR. Others I kind of like threw in there because I either forgot to add them or thought that, like, you know, I was in the mood to start them. And the 4 that I had on my June TBR that I did not get to that are going back onto the TBR cart are Mile High by Liz Tom Ford and Behind the Net by Stephanie Archer. I really do want to get to this one because it's a sports romance and I'm really excited about it. And then King of Wrath by Anna Huang. And finally, The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. So these are all going back on the TBR cart. I think we did pretty good with 10 books for the month anyways, and I'm really happy with the books I read. So that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed. Please let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these and if any of them are your favorites. Also, all my links are down below to my Instagram, Goodreads, and TikTok, and make sure you like and subscribe. That would really help my new channel. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.